Hey everyone, and welcome back. And today we're diving deep into the Libra New Moon happening on October 21st. And this one has those classic Libra vibes of beauty and harmony and balance and relationships, but there is a little bit of a twist because, of course, Libra can't just decide one particular energy. And, this new moon is also aspecting Pluto and Jupiter and Chiron, so there is a healing and transformative energy as well. And so we do have some tension in the chart that is really pushing us to recommit and recalibrate and redefine what true balance actually means for us. And so if you're interested in how this new moon could be impacting you and, all the rest of the astrology, then be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can stay updated on what's going on in the sky. And also, if you're new here, hi, I'm Mackenzie, aka Astromac, and I'm a professional astrologer, and I talk all things astrology on this channel. And I also have a Patreon where when you join, you get access to a group Discord and you get access to my weekly cosmic musings, and I also offer a bunch of different astrology readings. So if you're interested in any of that, then I'll link all of that down below. Now let's pull up the chart for this beautiful new moon in Libra and dive right in. As always, new moons are when the sun and the moon come together in the sky and they form a beautiful conjunction. And this conjunction is what signals the beginning of new cycles. So new moons tend to act as like this blank slate kind of energy where it's a time for new beginnings and fresh starts. That's why new moons are a good time to plant seeds of those intentions of things that you want to nurture and grow over the upcoming months. And so the seeds that we are planting right now and those intentions that we're setting will come to fruition during the Libra full moon in April of 2026. So new moons are when we can't see the moon at all in the sky, and so it's also known as the dark moon. So it's a time of lower energy where we just kind of naturally feel more like introspective and more reflective, and we're just drawn like to kind of like pull our energy inward and really save our energy for when the moon starts to wax, or when the moon's light starts to slowly grow again. And so with this new moon happening in the sign of Libra, that means that these new beginnings and the start of these new cycles and these fresh starts and the things that we might just find ourselves reflecting more on will have to do with all things Libra. So that means that it's like our relationships and our commitments and, bringing more balance and harmony into our lives and, even bringing more beauty into our lives. That's what these new beginnings will have to do with. And Libra is the cardinal air sign of the zodiac, meaning that it initiates human relationships and it initiates like social interactions. And if you haven't watched my Libra 101 video yet, then this would be a good time to go back and watch that because I went into great detail about the energy of Libra. But it's this energy of wanting to bring a greater sense of peace and balance and harmonize the internal with the external and vice versa. And, I always think of Libra being the scales and, just needing to find a greater sense of balance in our lives. So a new moon in Libra invites us to recommit to our relationships and our creative projects, and also to recalibrate and find a greater sense of balance in our relationships and, in our personal lives and our work lives and, all of that. And really ask yourself, like, where in your commitments or your relationships have you been giving too much? Or where have you been, holding back? Or what needs a greater feeling of balance? Or maybe it needs like some boundaries. And, it just really depends on where this new moon is happening for you in your own chart and what it's aspecting in your own chart. Because this new moon lands at 28 degrees of Libra, so that's pretty late in the sign. It's almost reached that full maturation of 29 degrees, but because it's at 28 degrees, that means like, this could be a brand new beginning, but more than likely it's going to be a new beginning around something that you've already started, whether that be like a creative project or a relationship or a new job or, like whatever it might be. It's just more this energy of like, something that you've thought about doing before or something that you've already started, but you just like maybe haven't followed through on it yet. Or maybe it's something that you've already been like nurturing and watering and trying to grow, but for whatever reason, maybe you've like lost the desire to try and continue watering it. But then it's like under this new moon, it's like it's breathing this fresh new air and this new life into it and kind of giving you that boost that you need in order to continue trying to nurture it, whatever it might be. When I look at this new moon chart, it really just looks like it's like this new moon is breathing this new life into our existing projects and existing relationships. So it's like under this new moon, we're given the opportunity to like recommit our energy or like fully commit to these things that we value most. So under this new moon, this is a really good time to like evaluate your priorities and see where you're placing your energy and where you're putting your focus and if you're getting anything in return, because remember, where attention goes, energy flows. And so is there a feeling of mutuality and like there's equal give and take and a feeling of reciprocity in whatever, this new moon is breathing new life into? Because you really have to decide. And, I know that's difficult for Libra energy to actually make a decision, but you really have to decide what you're willing to commit your time and your energy to, whether that's your relationships or your work or your creative projects or like your studies or, it could be a bunch of different things, because then once you do decide like what's worth your time and your energy and your focus, then you can really commit to it and then just like, forge ahead. Like think back to that Aries full moon a couple of weeks ago where we were being asked to really like take charge of our own lives and we were releasing the things that were no longer authentic to ourselves and our journey forward. And so now under this Libra new moon, it's like we have a better idea and we have more clarity around, who we are and what we want and a stronger sense of self and, just a better awareness about like what's true and authentic to ourselves. And that should help make those decisions a little bit easier. Now, the ruler of this new moon is Venus, and Venus is currently at home in Libra. So that's really like, emphasizing all this Libra energy. And so with the sun and the moon operating under Venus's like harmonizing, watchful eye, it's like everything that's out of balance becomes even more visible. And so this lunation is about discerning, which relationships or contracts or commitments or stories are, ready to shift or, what needs, again, a breath of fresh air into them. And so remember that Libra is all about like our human connections and relationships and, like working together and collaborating and, that equal give and take and that cooperation. And so this is a time to really look at your relationships and, evaluate your connections and reflect on how supported or not supported you feel by these connections. Then asking yourself, like, what needs to shift in order for you to feel more supported, and reflecting on like who or what is getting on that train and, going into this next phase of life with you and who or what is staying behind. Again, think back to that Aries full moon a couple of weeks ago where we were, finding that balance between Aries and Libra energy where, we want to be, our authentic, independent selves, but not so independent that we cut ourselves off and we isolate ourselves from others. And, also making sure that we're not so dependent on others that it becomes codependence, and just finding that sweet spot in the middle of, independent, but also working well with others. And in that middle, we find interdependence again. That is that Aries Libra polarity again, the dance of self and other, and, finding that sweet spot in the middle, because, I think it's really easy with Libra energy to really like put other people's wants and needs above yourself. And that's where we lean into the people-pleasing arena of Libra energy. And so under this new moon, don't forget about yourself and, don't be afraid to put yourself first. I think sometimes people interpret that as like being selfish, but there's nothing selfish about putting yourself first in your own life. We're all in charge of our own lives, and so we should all be our own number one priority. And so really take some time under this new moon to reflect on like what you want and what you need in your relationships or your projects, or wherever you have this 28 degrees of Libra. That's what's really being highlighted under this new moon. And I know I keep talking about relationships, but these relationships extend beyond just like our human connections, although that is kind of like the main theme with Libra energy is like that human to human relationships, but it also extends to like that relationship that you have with yourself, because that relationship you have with yourself is the most important relationship you'll have in your life, and the relationship that you have with yourself tends to act as a mirror in your other relationships that you have. And then again, the relationships extend even beyond that. It's the relationship that you have like with your work, and it's the relationship that you have with your money, and the relationship that you have with the place that you live, and the relationship that you have with your community. And it even goes beyond that, and it's like the relationship that you have with your creative projects and your hobbies, and the relationship that you have with your own creative self-expression, and the relationship you have with your family and your friends, and your romantic relationships, and the relationship you have with like what you're studying, and like also the relationship that you have to like your spiritual connection, and your relationship to your higher self and the universe. It goes on and on and on. So all of that is up for reflection under this new moon, and you have to be the one to decide, what you want to commit your time and your energy to, and if these relationships are still like feeding you and energizing you in the way that they used to, or if it's time for, a recalibration and for a reset. Because if it is something that you still very much care about and you value, then it's like this new moon is breathing that fresh life into whatever it might be. But if it's something that you don't value and you don't want to put any more time and energy into, then this will kind of help you reroute. This new moon will. And so this is a time to do some reflection and co-create with the universe, and really try to create a beautiful life for yourself. And so I heard this quote from Timothée Chalamet, and I think about it a lot, but he said that you can be the master of your fate and the captain of your soul, but you have to realize that life is coming from you and not at you, and that takes time. And so when you can really recognize that, you're the creator of your life, then you can intentionally work with the energy of this new moon and all of the other astrology transits, and really co-create with the universe and work together. That is what puts the power in your own hands. And so think of it that you're like in partnership with the universe, or you're in partnership with your higher self, or you're in partnership with your spirit guides, like however you want to think about it, and you're co-creating and creating a beautiful life for yourself. And so really reflect on like what you want your life to be, and then setting intentions, how you want to create that life moving forward. Now this new moon is also forming some interesting aspects to some of the other planets. Most notably, it's in a cardinal T-square with Jupiter in Cancer and Chiron in Aries. And so this opposition to Chiron tells me that there is a healing quality to this new moon, where we might be doing some healing through our relationships. Chiron in Aries really speaks to like the identity wound, and so it's like some kind of wounding or sensitivity around, our authentic self. And so it's this wound that we might carry into our relationships. But this is not like something that everyone will be feeling. And so like, not everyone will be feeling triggered or especially sensitive under this new moon. But if you do have a planet or a point around that 24 degrees of Aries where Chiron is sitting, then you might feel, that sensitivity a little bit more, or like a pain point might get triggered. But overall, the way I'm interpreting this Chiron opposition means that, if we want to grow in our relationships, then we're going to have to be willing to do some self-work first. It's kind of like you can't just keep repeating the same old relationship patterns and expect for things to end up differently. You have to be willing to do the work on yourself and do the healing work and make those changes if you want to be in relationships that reflect your level of healing or, whatever it might be. So if you do find yourself getting triggered by others under this new moon, kind of, take some time to do some reflection, because those triggers are really pointing to where you still need to do some amount of healing. Because remember, our triggers are our teachers, and there's a lot of wisdom that can be seen when we get triggered and when we can take some time to, do that reflection and then do the healing work from there. And again, because this is a new moon, that means that it's a new beginning and a new cycle around something. And, just because it's a new beginning doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. And so this could be a new beginning around healing that relational wound or healing that identity wound in how we relate with others. So again, just paying attention to where you may be feeling a little bit more sensitive, because that just points to where you might need a little bit more love and care and support. Because when you feel more loved and cared for and supported, then that leaves room for growth and expansion. And that's where Jupiter in Cancer comes in. And so that square to Jupiter can just make everything feel a little bit like extra, because Jupiter tends to expand whatever is going on. And so I think when some people see Jupiter, they're like, oh, this is just all about luck and abundance and expansion. And, it definitely can be, but if you're feeling a little bit more insecure during this time, then Jupiter will expand that. And so when you can lean into the reflective and healing aspect of that opposition to Chiron, then Jupiter can really expand that. So really lean into the nurturing side of this Jupiter in Cancer. I kind of view Jupiter in Cancer as this welcoming, warm hug that kind of tells us that, everything is going to be okay. And so I always think of squares, they're difficult or whatever, but they are that friction that is needed to innovate and create something new that, we've never done before. And so even though it might feel uncomfortable, it is going to create new opportunities for ourselves moving forward when we can do that healing work and really work on filling up our own cup and not be so focused on filling other people's wants and needs and putting their needs above ourselves that, we forget about ourselves. And so when you can nurture yourself and fill up your own cup and know what you want and desire, then that makes you better able to be there for others in your relationships as well. So this is a time to do a check-in and, see how your wants and needs are getting met. And so with Jupiter also squaring Chiron in this T-square, don't be surprised if sensitivities around your past or around family and family dynamics, or that feeling of belonging and that feeling of emotional security is being brought up under this new moon. But really these sensitivities are just pointing to where you need that extra love and care, and where you need to be the one to fill up your own cup. And, if you're willing to, then asking the people in your life for that additional support, because more than likely people do want to be there for you. It just takes you kind of, putting it out there. And so really use this tension to nurture those relationships in your life, including that relationship with yourself and the relationship with the universe and the relationship with your creative projects and your creative side and your spiritual side and all of the above. Also be aware of overextending yourself though, and kind of running yourself thin, trying to nurture those relationships. And so remember to first nurture that relationship with yourself, and then, fill up your own cup, and then let that cup floweth over into your relationships. Now we also have an out of sign square to Pluto in Aquarius that just recently stationed direct. And so even though it's out of sign, it's still less than, it's 3 degrees away. So that's a pretty close square aspect. And, Pluto is that planet that's all about, transformation and evolution and digging deep beneath the surface. And so Pluto energy can feel really intense because it is this energy that's, pushing us to grow and transform and evolve. And growth and transformation are not things that are usually comfortable, they're usually pretty uncomfortable actually. And Pluto tends to unearth things, so it's bringing our awareness to a deeper truth in our lives that we maybe don't want to see, but we need to see it. But it's being brought to our awareness so that we can process it and grow from it. And so Pluto squaring this Libra new moon really tells me that something about like our relationship patterns or relationship cycles or other kind of relational dynamics is being, brought to our awareness, and we're being asked to recognize something about these dynamics. Like maybe you have a pattern of like codependence, or maybe a pattern of, closing off when things get too vulnerable or too close, or maybe you have a pattern of like holding grudges or holding resentments because you don't speak up when something bothers you in your relationships for fear of like rocking the boat, or whatever it might be. There's lots of different examples. And so Pluto might kind of bring our awareness to whatever it might be and kind of unearth it, but it's being brought to our awareness to heal that. But I'm not really viewing this as being like a dramatic purge of our relationships and, like releasing relationships, but I am kind of viewing it more as like authenticity and, like being our authentic self in our relationships, and that vulnerability that comes with that authenticity. And so we really transform through our vulnerability. And if you want to kind of have these deep, fulfilling, and meaningful relationships in your life, then you have to be willing to do the work on yourself and do the healing work and be vulnerable. Now, Mercury and Mars are also conjunct at 20 degrees of Scorpio during this new moon, adding another layer of intensity and transformation and alchemy. So this is a time to be very, very intentional with your words, because this is like, words cut deep with this transit. So if you can avoid it, try to avoid like losing your temper, because this is like, words might come out a little bit sharper than intended. But really try to take advantage of this energy, because it's great for self-reflection and, doing some like that psychoanalyzing on ourselves, because we're really able to dig deep under this transit and kind of like get to the core of whatever we might be dealing with. This is kind of like a be brutally honest with yourself kind of transit, because, if you can't be honest with yourself, then you can't be honest with others. And if you can't be honest with others, then, how deep and healing and fulfilling are your relationships really? And so we're in this interesting time and this interesting tension between, wanting everything to feel peaceful and beautiful and harmonious, and then also realizing that peace built on avoidance and sweeping things under the rug and not rocking the boat isn't real peace and isn't real harmony, but it's like a superficial harmony. And so we have to be willing to have those uncomfortable conversations, and we have to be willing to move through those uncomfortable emotions that come with the healing work and doing the work on ourselves. It's not easy, comfortable stuff. But then once we've moved through the intensity and, the difficult emotions that come with the healing work, that's what true growth is. And that's where we get to know ourselves deeper, and we're able to build deeper connections in our lives. And so this new moon is a new beginning in a relational cycle. And so that goes for like partnerships and, your romantic relationships, as well as friendships and work collaborations and your creative projects, and most importantly, the relationship that you have with yourself. And so overall, this is a great new moon to start something new that involves like social connections and bringing more harmony and peace and beauty and fairness and balance into the area of life where you have this 28 degrees of Libra. And so really think of this as like our invitation to rest and reflect and recalibrate and recommit to these things. And again, you could also think of this new moon as it's like breathing fresh life into your existing creative projects or relationships or, whatever it might be, helping to start a new cycle based on like deep and true authenticity, and just like setting the tone with like these good vibes and like these harmonious, beautiful, aesthetic vibes. And remember, co-create with the universe to create a beautiful life for yourself. And, you don't have to do it alone. That is the theme with Libra, doing things with others and collaborating. And so this Libra new moon is our reminder that true beauty and true connection and true harmony and balance and peace comes from within. It's not found externally, but it comes from within. And so set intentions from this authentic space of how you want to create a beautiful life for yourself moving forward. So yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about this Libra new moon, but if you liked what I had to say, then be sure to leave a like and comment down below where this new moon is happening for you, and share it with your other astrology loving friends because that would really help me out. And yeah, thanks for watching, and until next time, love you, bye!